Hey everyone, we're back here at Secure World Boston. Of course, I'm Paul Asadorian from Security Weekly, and I'm here with Dan Rheault. He works with product. You're in kind of a transitionary type.
Yeah, in between like product marketing
Yep.
and now more so product on the integration sides and
Right.
managing what those look like.
Yep.
And some of the other security capacities at different
At
functions.
Tufin,
Yeah.
who we largely know for security policy orchestration. Would that be the correct term?
The marketing team would approve, right?
Okay,
So security policy orchestration
Yeah.
and then like security policy management. It depends upon which Gartner dialect you want to
Sure.
speak and align to.
But now, as many companies that do similar types of things in this space, you have morphed into other areas that are really the next logical progression of, I need to not just manage my firewall policies, right? I need to manage my access policies. And those translated down into containers and cloud today.
Right. So, like Tufin was kind of born and bred for kind of that firewall management capacity, network security devices. Mm-hmm. But the network's changed, right? Private cloud, SDN, like VMware NSX,
Sure.
ACI, that's been introduced. Public cloud, and now most recently Kubernetes. So now seems to be a lot of like single pane solutions for these vendors, right? And typically they produce them.
Right. Yeah, like you can manage your traditional firewalls. You can use the CASBs and all that stuff in your cloud. And then containers is yet another couple of sets of vendors you can use, right?
But your network is comprised of all of these things, right?
Yes.
So you have a bunch of different single pane of glasses. So like I always kind of jokingly just summarize it that Tufin's the single pane of glass for the single pane of glass solution. So keep using the vendors that you have in place, the devices, but have continuity and management with it. So understand the policies in place. Usually that's most relevant towards organizations that have just been adding access over time, not really worried about removing it.
Yep.
That usually results in either a breach where someone's able to pivot the network, use access rules that were provisioned shouldn't be there and shouldn't have been there in the first place either, or they violate compliance.
And I think it's more complicated than managing firewalls. I mean, maybe because firewalls have been around for so long and we've managed firewalls, but I feel like when you go to the cloud and containers and applications, defining their access rules is so much more complex because it's almost like you have firewalls within firewalls.
Yeah,
right?
and there's so many, you see people kind of securing themselves in the cloud in different ways, right? One, you might go to a traditional route and view it as an extension of the network. You're probably using security groups, or maybe you're deploying like a virtual firewall there, and you're just saying, okay, I'm going to manage that firewall just like I do the other ones. Or, which is where kind of complications start to arise. You have an organization where they say, hey, we're going cloud first from here on out. And also, by the way, security, you guys are really sharp, so you're going to be able to catch up and figure out how to secure these things. But in the interim, the development team's going to just kind of manage the cloud, and you'll play catch up later on. So it ends up creating kind of one of two scenarios. One, either security is securing the cloud as an extension of the network, or two, they don't actually have visibility into it, and things are changing there. So
that's the wrong approach to have security say, well, like kind of do what you did in the past, but do it in the cloud, and have developer like kind of do what you do, but do it in the cloud. I think when you reach that point, you really need to come together and work together to understand those policies. And Dan, let me give you an example, right?
Yeah.
So we actually had an incident at Security Weekly that stemmed from on-premise hardware failure. And I'm like, okay, well, we're just going to move to the cloud. I'm not going to rebuild hardware, right? It was legacy. I'm like, let's just go into the cloud. And then doing that in a rush, we made mistakes. That mistake led to a breach where someone uploaded a container and launched a distributed denial of service attack. But what I realized is that from vendors like Tufin, we can get ahead of this problem so that when I deploy a new app into the cloud, those security restrictions are either flagged, or I'm notified, or I just can't open up a Docker API in this case to the internet. Is that pretty much the gist of it?
And also, it's a question of, do you even know if that's being opened
up?
up,
I didn't even know until I saw the data coming out of our cloud going, oh my, that's how I found out, is I got all the alerts, because I didn't know.
I want to say, maybe it was like Rich Mogul or someone else that tweeted, it's like, if you don't know what Kubernetes is, or you haven't heard kubectl, you need to orient yourself towards it because it's being used in your environment.
Yep.
And it's just the reality, right? So businesses have prioritized application development. Security is still very much so in play, but they're meant to enable the business, right? So in some ways now in the kind of the cloud scenario, they're playing catch up. But really what we're trying to do is bridge that gap between Kubernetes, public cloud, and the on-prem stuff, right? Because if you have a vulnerable container that can be exploited, that within itself is a small problem. I guess the bigger question that I would then ask is, what else did it have access to on my network, right? Because things are just more complex. They start in the cloud, and they can go all the way into software-defined network into the data centers.
Right.
So, and all these things are connected, and they're rapidly connected. So Tufin seeks to provide visibility over that. You can understand the topology of the network, the access that's in place, that which would violate compliance, and remove that. And when I say remove it, it's removed across all the different vendors too. So it's not like...
Yeah, and that's the challenge today. I think, when we think of traditional firewalls, if you studied TCP/IP and you studied how firewalls worked, you could manage firewalls and even multiple firewalls and transition from firewall vendor to firewall vendor, and it was all pretty much the same. When we move into cloud and containers and the apps, there's so many different ecosystems, there's so many ways to configure it that it takes a lot of time to fully understand just what you have, where you want to go, that we need tools such as yours to help us get a lay of the land at all times, regardless of development swapping out some technology over here, IT swapping out another technology over here, because it's all virtual now.
Yeah, and that empowerment is important, right? That's why we see businesses very successful now. But it comes inherent at the risk. If you don't have people that understand security, can they secure things?
It's true.
So, and we've seen some of our clients approach it in different ways. Some of them said, okay, we're going to grab a couple of our DevOps developers. We're going to bring them in security, and we're going to go let them try to break stuff. And we're going to do that for 90 days. And after, we're going to release them back to the wild. They're going to impart their newfound security wisdom on what good security looks like in application development lifecycle. And they're going to impart it to their members. And we'll just rotate through this over time. It was really good.
Does that work?
It worked for 90 days.
That's a good story. I can see that.
It makes sense though, because at the end of the day, the application developers aren't really getting paid to secure things.
They want to build stuff, right? It's it's different. Yeah. It's just a different mindset.
And so that's where that critical piece of automation comes in, where if you can say, all right, applications team, why don't you guys just put in exactly what you need for the application, and we'll figure out all the networking aspects of it across everything. And
all the different trusts, right? Essentially what we're talking about is trust relationships.
Yeah, and when we say that security is checking those, we have it's a zone-to-zone based connectivity matrix, and you can really layer these on. So classic examples would be regulatory mandates like PCI, NERC with technical prescriptions, but also every organization has their own security policy. There are services that are inherently risky.
Yeah, my new policy is no Docker APIs exposed to the internet. Right?
You get some crypto mining?
Back then it was denial of service. That's what they were uploading.
Okay.
And shortly after that started the trend of crypto mining on that front. So
it's funny. Earlier I was mentioning that I was at another security company 7-8 years ago. And I stepped away. I was working in the fintech sector, and I came back, and I was ready for all these things that had fundamentally changed. In security, I swear to God, it's all the same problems.
It is.
And roughly all the same solutions, too, right?
They manifest themselves differently, but it is fundamentally the same issues.
Yeah. And again, for Tufin, it's the access controls, right?
Access and trust.
Yeah, and then the extension of automation, and I should define that because that's such a buzzwordy term that I bet you everyone here does automation in different facets. But when I use it, it's the actual application of changes. So when we say, hey, networking, you guys can figure out how to connect all these things and benchmark it against security, determine if you want to do it, it's a one-click push across all the different things in the validation. So for teams, I should really say companies that are really emphasizing that agility, that really need to integrate security moving forward, that's kind of where Tufin has the best value proposition, particularly those that are now spanning all the different network
and that's based on your history as a company as well, right?
Yeah.
The policy orchestration was, I think, kind of the beginnings of what the SOAR we have today that is more applicable to a lot of different use cases. But you guys were doing it first.
Yeah, and because of that, we've also been able to work on kind of models that a lot of our clients like to align themselves to. It usually starts at the concept of visibility. What do I have in my network? Because more often than not, if you're starting in security, you're inheriting someone else's production, right? And even if they were super qualified and did a really diligent job, they probably also had stuff in their network that they included because the guy before them had, and they didn't want to change it because they don't know what
they want to break something.
Yeah. Don't break anything. That's the
Right.
most important part, right? But once you have visibility over that, understand if things are being used, you can start figuring out if you actually need them. If you can back that stuff out, then you can start applying basically a compliance model. So these are the services that can be allowed, not will be allowed, right? Between these different zones and or explicitly blocked, what exists in my network now violates compliance. So aside from best practices like removing shadowed rules or those that are inherently risky, which ones of those void compliance and I have to back out? And then from that point onwards, because you have a compliance mechanism in place, that's what allows you to design changes. So we understand the network, we understand the topology, we understand what constitutes risk and access request change. Can I now design changes across my network based upon that? And lastly is provisioning, right?
And then you provision those changes out.
Yeah. And once you have all that mapped out, that's when you kind of get to more like that application-driven connectivity model.
Yeah.
Where we say, all right, app guys, give us what you need. We'll figure out everything else. And that's the kind of piece that Tufin fits in. We understand the firewalls, the private cloud, public cloud, Kubernetes.
Awesome. Dan, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.